Good evening, and you're very welcome to episode 40. I nearly said 30 there. Episode 40 of the Women's National League podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. Myself, Breifne, Earley, and of course, as always, for the 40th time this year, Aaron, it's Aaron Clarke from the WNL Show. Aaron.
How have I survived 40 episodes with you this year?
I know. Well, I could ask the exact same question about myself. You've been all over the place. You've been great. I've been stuck here in the office or whichever office we're in at the moment. You've been off to Hungary and Australia and anywhere else in between that the Ireland girls have been. You've been all over the map at this stage, literally all over the map in the year. But it's been a fabulous year. We've drawn the league season at home to a close. Of course, we do have that cup final on Sunday. We're going to be talking about that plenty through the next hour or so. But we'll also be chatting about maybe some of the facilities. I think that's on our talking point. We had a chat. We were both at the Peamount game at the weekend. A great end to the season. It was lovely to be invited officially by James when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago. And it was a fitting end to the year. 6-1 winners against Sligo Rovers. Probably, to be fair, it flattered Peamount a little bit on the balance of play. Definitely the better side, but probably not 6-1 the better side. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I don't think I really were. What was it? 2-0, 2-0 at half time. Got up to 6-0, and then they got a goal back. In a way, I was a 5, and they got the goal back. In a way, I was actually delighted for the fact that Sligo didn't leave that game goalless, because it would have been unfair on them. Steve Feeney's last game in charge, but you could definitely see they were trying to do things at times, and they frustrated Peamount a bit with what, like, everybody was saying, it was going to be a celebration. Peamount had to work hard for the first couple of goals and sort of to get them. Amy Hardy in goal had made a good couple of saves in the first half, and Peamount was starting to get frustrated. When the goal came, it was a nice pass, and then Jess Fitzgerald obviously finishing with the first goal, and you started to thought once they got one, they would get a couple going into 2.5 half time. You could still see people were really excited and looking forward to the trophy celebration. But I'd say, in fairness to Peamount, did a very good second half on the cards. The one thing that a lot of people are saying is their sponsor was obviously offering a bonus of 500 euro to their academy for every goal that was scored. The question around Peamount was, would they continue to go for it? And they did, in fairness to them, and it was probably the right thing that they had to do. But I think Sligo played their part in the game, and I think it'd be a bit disrespectful to say Sligo just came up to Dublin just to get rolled over upon. They tried, did a couple of chances as well, and like, for Sligo, it's been a difficult season. It's been a tough season. Like, some of their away fixtures to Dublin in particular, when you look at the Shells game in the miserable conditions where they lose 1-0, they come up to Peamount. It's sort of it's a bit of a sad ending to the way it ended. But like, there's lots of reflection in Sligo. I think for them,
it's funny because when you say that, because we both bumped into separately. I know we both spoke to Tommy Hewitt over the weekend. He was up looking at his charges. He, of course, replaces Steve Feeney, one of at least four managerial changes that we're aware of coming into next season. He's the only one confirmed. There's 3 vacancies that we're aware of. Noel King, of course, leaving Shells. There's a vacancy down in Wexford. Lizzie Kent was there as a temporary charge for the last few months. And Alban Heiss, of course, will have to be replaced.
It's actually 5. There's actually 5. They haven't officially announced it. Bowes, well. And that's to come out. I'm sorry to cut across the Peamount game, but the way Bowes have acted in this situation with the managerial change is actually disgraceful. They haven't come out and said anything. They've literally, everybody's talking about it. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knew the management had left weeks ago. Like, why as a club, if you're trying to attract players, you're trying to set standards, why as a club do you not just come out and say, okay, we've decided we're going to part way with our management team, wasn't working out. That's okay. People say, okay, that's grand. But the fact of actually saying nothing and just sort of hoping it will fade under a tree and nobody will really twig it, like, you just had to look at the bench for the Shells game. I think there was, the only person who was still there was the kit woman, Emma McDonough. Everyone else was new, and they just come out and actually treat the league with respect and just say, listen, we've let our manager go. Other clubs have done it. We've seen with Wexford, they come out and said Stephen Quinn had left during the season. Like, it's nothing to be ashamed of, but the way they've handled the situation, for me, I think is extremely poor from Bowes. And like, I know that on the men's side of things, they're not having the great best of the times at the minute, losing the cup final and then really the poor run of form. But I just think the way they've handled it, it's not a great look for the league, and it's not a great look for Bowes either.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And we've had this conversation a few times through the year for various different issues where, again, within that League of Ireland community that exists, that pre-exists before the WNL sides or the League of Ireland women's sides have come on to fruition, how much do they really care about women's football? And I think in a lot of League of Ireland clubs, I think if they're really honest, The answer to that is probably not a whole pile. There are some who are phenomenal. The investment that Shamrock Rovers put in last year, despite not winning a trophy, not getting to the cup final, we'll talk about that as well later in the show. But it's laudable that they've made that investment and stuck to it and really committed to the women's side of the game. Shells have done similar in recent years as well, in terms of the resources that they were allowed given, that they have put in. Some others have been really good. Athlone, it nearly seems to have gone almost like Peamount, where the women are nearly more important than the men down there, and they've been rewarded with some really good league performances in the last 2 seasons and 2 cup finals. And I think it does come through. I don't think it's a surprise that Shamrock Rovers, Shells, Athlone, and Peamount, who would probably be the 4 clubs that I would say absolutely have committed. Maybe Galway as well, who won the Avenir Sports Cup, have really committed to women's football. The jury, in my opinion, is still out on the others. And I say that maybe Wexford, you could argue, is definitely in there as well, but they have been kind of outside.
Wexford for next year is where we're going to really look at Wexford.
Wexford's really exciting. Like, we haven't even talked about that in our build-up or even in the bit when we were chatting off air beforehand. I think the future for Wexford is really exciting. Some of the statements that have come out this week from the county council, the local league, Wexford FC itself, we did know they were merging the men's and the women's together. Now it looks like the whole of football in Wexford is really looking to get behind this new facility project. Unlike the rest of the League of Ireland, I think the fact that the council are involved, the fact that they have to get rid of Ferry Carrick to allow for a new motorway, is probably going to speed things up and ensure it gets done, which I think is key in League of Ireland developments. We've seen delays at Bowes, we've seen delays at Finn Harps, we've seen plans at Sligo that haven't really seen anything on the ground as such yet. I'm sure we will. Sligo, to be fair, are very good in terms of community of pushing those projects across the line. But we see a lot of delays in Talca Park, Dalymount, Finn Park, or the new facility up there in Finn Valley. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next year or 2 pans out. And I think it's important for the clubs. I really, really do. I think it's really important that clubs get that identity for women's football within their own brands. The investment that Shamrock Rovers have put in this year hasn't reaped the rewards. I know they'll say it's been a success, cup semi-final and 3rd place, but I think if you ask them privately, I don't think they'll be happy with the year they've had. And I think it's a big question mark now as to whether they continue to invest in that side of the club. I think they will. I hope they will. But I know there's internal conversations about resources and the direction that money is going, and there are arguments against the women's football internally within the club. I think it's important that women's football hold out and keep that investment and keep that level of resources.
On that, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I'll be interested to get your opinion on it. Do you think Shamrock Rovers come in too heavy?
100%.
That's what I'm thinking.
100%. I think they had to, first of all, because of the stature that Shamrock Rovers have within the game, and I think you need to also appreciate how far ahead of the rest of the country both Shells and Peamount were 12 months ago. I think realistically, I know Wexford were in the hunt, Athlone were in the hunt, but were they really in the hunt? When push came to shove, it was always going to be the Peas and Shelburne that were top 2 in the table. And I think, they both dropped points.
I'm going to stop you. I think you're doing a disservice there to Wexford, because you have to realise Peamount couldn't even win the league coming to the last day of the season last year, and like, you're right in what you're saying. Over the years, it's been them too. But don't forget Wexford. Don't forget, but Wexford have won 3-4 league titles as well.
Definitely 3, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I'd say, like, from the viewpoint, I think it's always been that top. I think for someone to make a breakthrough, but I don't know from a Shamrock Rovers viewpoint if the sort of investment that they made was actually needed to make that. Yes, they needed a sizable investment, but I don't think making the investment that they made was probably needed to the extent of what they did. And like, the problem is for them is now, if they don't sustain it or they don't keep it close to where it was, people will just come out and absolutely, there'll be a hatchet job against Shamrock Rovers, because the problem is, and they made statements themselves about bringing the standards of the league up and bringing stuff like that up. Unfortunately, when you don't get to a cup final or you don't win the league, people are going to turn and say you made these statements in the pre-season, and they're going to have to suck it up when it comes to, you know, the abuse and the backlash they get for saying these sort of things. But like, they are one of not many clubs to put their hands in their pockets and say, you know, we'll offer this. I remember speaking to a couple of players and they were saying, like, when you walked into Rovers, you were given everything. This is the training gear you're going to wear. This is what you're going to travel. This is this and that. And the thing is, other clubs have to get there. Other clubs have to get to that extent as well. And that's the thing.
I think that needs to be the bare minimum. And I wouldn't be against I know a smaller league is not ideal in terms of the number of teams you face week in, week out, and the variety of the games you play. But I think it's quite clear to me definitely over the last 3 to 4 seasons, and probably since the inception of the league, the bottom third of the league has always been way off the pace. You look at the Kilkennys, the Limericks, the Treaties, the Corks, the Sligos, they just haven't been at the races. And you could even make an argument this year for DLR and Wexford as part of that group as well of teams who just aren't at the races this year in terms of competition. And I think we're looking at a case where, ideally, in a perfect world, you sit down with NIFL and you look at what happened in the Avenir Cup, and we had 16 teams that were more than capable of taking each other on at that level. I think there's 16 teams on the island, plus the 5 that weren't part of it from NIFL is 21 teams, and you've got a lower division as well, I think, up north, or regional divisions. You've got regional divisions here. I don't see how we can't have a league with approximately 20 to 30 teams in maybe a 10-team Premier Division and then 2 10-team First Divisions beneath that. And I think it becomes really competitive. And the teams like Linfield and Glentoran and Strikers and a few others from up north who did really, really well. Cliftonville, of course, got to the final of the Avenir Sports Cup. They would do well against our top sides. And I think subsequently the Scions and Derry and these type of teams would do very well against the DLRs, the Sligos, the Treaties, the Corks at that level. And I think
looking at our bottom 6 teams, right, in the league over the last 5 games, Sligo Rovers won 2 games out of 5. Cork City won 1 game. Bows won 1 game. Every other team from Bows, Wexford, DLR, Sligo, Treaty, and Cork, between all them teams in the last 5 games, they only won 4 games between them.
And I guarantee you they were all against each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably don't have that to hand, but I know Sligo beat Bows, for example, or Sligo beat DLR wasn't in that second last game, and so they all beat each other. None of them beat a team.
And Sligo beat Bows. Sligo beat Bows and DLR. Bows beat Treaty. I think Cork beat Treaty, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they need to. We need to see a more realistic league structure. And while what's there is great, I think now we have the capacity. We've got a load of clubs coming through at 17s and 19s, and we've a load of player pools that exist. And yes, maybe not all of them are good enough to get through to compete against the Peamounts, the Shells, the Shamrock Rovers, the Galways of this world. But I think if you were to say to Drogheda, Dundalk, Cove, some of these smaller sides, Longford even, just in terms of geography, where they're located is ideal really for some clubs, that we should be looking at having those teams in a second division spread regionally so that you keep the costs down. The standard is not quite at the same level as the top half of the Premier Division, and we can go ahead. Without the Northern Ireland teams, I still think it works with 8 and 8. You know, you could definitely find 5 clubs coming out of under 19 that will put teams into a second division, put them in there with maybe Sligo, Treaty, Cork, or whoever happens to be the bottom 3 next season. I'm not picking 3. If they can get their act together and get the results to be out of those bottom 3 positions, brilliant. But I'd relegate 3 teams next year and have them in a second tier with 5 brand new teams. That's what I'd be looking to do. And I'd be dealing with the teams in the 19s to identify who those clubs are going to be. I've named 4. You could throw Cove in there. You could possibly throw Mayo or Kerry in there as well from a geographical spread. Carlow Kilkenny I'd love to see in there. Cavan Monaghan, if they've got something going as well. I'm not quite sure if they've got something going. Donegal, of course, Harps are up there. And even trying to coax Derry City across into a second tier, it might be more attractive to them in terms of if it's a regionalised division, it might be more attractive to them than the Northern Ireland League, where they are, let's be honest, getting hockeyed every week to a large extent. So I think there's a lot of possible opportunities for clubs within the league to really grow into the level that they're at. And I think we have enough interest now. We definitely have the player pool. We have the coaching pool. We need to now look at creating more opportunities for more players to play at adult level, at senior adult level, and build it up to where we've got 20 to 30 clubs playing in a league, ideally cross border. But if we have to, 15 to 20 clubs in a single state league, brilliant again. Do you know what I mean? You could make it 8 and then 2 6s beneath that, and you'd end up with 20 teams. The players are there. Definitely, if you reduce the level that some of them have to play at week in, week out, I think we could find the players and let them develop from 17, 18, 19 through a senior side.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. The thing is, these are the sort of conversations that need to be happening now, because if things like this don't happen in the next couple of years, you're just going to lose so many young players to different sports, to different things. And like the other side of it is that like we all want this league to grow and develop. We all want this league to push on. We all want this league to be the best league it can be. But at the minute, it's currently stagnated. The Shamrock Rovers, yes, they added a little new buzz to it, but that's only one team. Whereas when you're looking at the gaps, I think there's an awful lot of pressure on.
I think Galway added a buzz to it as well this year, to be fair. A little bit more subdued and a little bit less flashy and in your face.
The reason why I didn't say Galway is because the fact that we did have a Galway WFC team last year. That's why I sort of didn't say where Shamrock Rovers come in as a new team. But your thing is, like, you look at teams like Treaty. For me, there's a lot of pressure on Treaty next year. The managerial appointment is massive. Who they get, they need to get someone who's going to be good and who's going to be of a high standard. Alvin Heiss has done an awful lot of work there this year, an awful lot of great work, to which we'll probably see him being rewarded, if not this off season, maybe next season with another opportunity at a crack at the women's Premier Division with a team. But like, for me, the fact that they've gone Dave Rooney's last season, then they brought Donna and Alvin, they're just sort of flip-flopping manager. And like, when Kieran McCormick coming out and saying, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to improve, there's a big pressure this year.
Niall Connolly had the guts of a year in the middle of that as well, between Dave and
Correct.
Yeah,
correct. Niall Connolly was there as well for you.
So there's been a lot of changes. Like, they're going into their fifth manager in basically 4 seasons, 4 years. So like, that's a lot of change. I think it was inevitable. A couple of things broke the surprise for me when I did see the announcement of Alban leaving, and I happened to be in Peamount when I got the message straight after the game the other evening. We were both invited to the post-match celebrations, and I do want to talk about that, because for me, that's one of the highlights of the season, and I'll talk about why that is later on. Not just because I was invited and I was there, but the actual event, I think, was kind of a special night. But Alban's notification came through, and I showed it to 1 or 2 people either side of me. There was a few from the club and a few from around the FAI that were just in my vicinity, and I said, oh my God, this is after happening. And people were surprised I wasn't, and the reason I wasn't was he wasn't at the announcement. Tommy Barrett was at the announcement the day the investment was announced and the explainers and the interviews were done for the future of the club. Alban wasn't part of that, and I think that spoke volumes. And I think as well that we are going to see a heavy local influence in the team next year, both in the management or Canadian influence. It's going to be one or the other. We're either going to see a Canadian coach coming in with a half a dozen Canadian players to match what's already there, or we're going to see a local. And there's plenty of people. Like, the one legacy, the one really good positive legacy that Limerick FC left was their policy when it came to youth coaches was they didn't pay anybody for their time, but they paid for the coaching badges. So you have, per head of population or per team, you have an unbelievable amount of A and B licensed coaches in the greater Limerick area. Now, the junior football community in Limerick is huge, but those coaches want to move on and want to be involved in higher levels as well, as do most of the players from a young age. So you've got this pool of players that really want to, or pool of coaches that really want the opportunity, and they have options. I think Alban was great. Would I have removed him from the position if it was in my power?
I'm not convinced they removed him.
Okay.
From what I'm hearing, I'm not convinced. From what I did hear, and I'd be open to correction, I did hear like the travelling was quite a lot as well for Alban, and you look at the way he was complimentary to the club. I think it might have been more of a mutual thing. It'd be interesting to have a chat with Alban and sort of understand, because normally, off the back of a season that they did have. But you've mentioned something that sort of caught my eye for the wrong reason. If they bring in a Canadian coach and half a dozen Canadian players, what does that do for football and region in Limerick? It does nothing. It sort of just. Maybe it gives them a couple of fans, but what does it do for the next generation? What do you see the next time in Madden? The next time Madden going to go. But the thing for me is the next time Madden going to Galway. Michaela Lawrence, you have to remember, Michaela Lawrence was there. Nicole Nix was there. There's several of that underage team from Wexford Youths. We're all at Treaty.
I think importing players will buy them time, and I think that's key for them at the moment. You take, if you take a Treaty team, but let me just finish here now for a second. If you take the likes of those girls you've just named, and they're perfect examples, there's plenty more who've been to Cork, Athlone, Wexford, Galway. They've gone everywhere over the last few seasons. they've left what they felt was a sinking ship. Now, if Kieran McCormack and Mary Curtin, who I believe have the connections and the capability of doing that job, if they can make that side, let's say, as competitive as a DLR over the years or an Athlone over the years, all of a sudden staying at home in Limerick becomes a more attractive option to the 16, 17, 18-year-old who's going out and getting beaten every week and one of the oldest on the team at 19, 20. And I think if you can solidify that standard at the top level, it does create that atmosphere where an Amy Madden feels like, okay, I'm getting a half here, I'm getting 30 minutes here, I'm getting a start every now and again, and I'm part of something that's successful, even if it's only moderately successful in mid-table or the lower ends of that kind of top 4 or 5 spots. I think it's a different proposition. It's not positive in the long term, but I think it could give them that little bit of a jolt, provided the players they bring in are good enough to get them to that level, and that's the other key.
I'm not sure because I think it could go the complete other opposite way, where players just like, you know what, they're bringing loads of players here. If this is the way they're going to go in the future, I'm better off going somewhere else. That's my concern, and like especially because Treaty's been known to have mass exodus at an underage and stuff like that as well. So like the first thing is sustaining and getting rid of the mass exodus. That's the most important thing for me at the minute in terms of, and sort of just having to stabilize. And like the problem is, and I know Shells finished second in the league, but the amount of players that they brought in from abroad, some of them didn't work. Like you look at some of the players didn't even last half a season, some of them gone. It hasn't worked there. Only realistically, Maggie Pearce has worked. Christy Gray has worked. Morgan Reese in patches work. Libby Moore was good against Shamrock Rovers, but she's played very limited minutes. Whereas I think for Shells, the best players come out of Shells this season: young Hannah Healy, Rebecca Devereaux, players like that. Leah Doyle stepping up massively. I thought Megan Smith-Lynch has had a great year. It's been all the players who've been at the club. Alex Kavanagh for many years. A lot of them sort of players have stepped up massively for Shells. That's what my concern is that clubs are too quick to look upon what's out there, what's further afield, and it doesn't always work. And that's my concern.
I think as well, specifically about Shells, I think, and I like Noel. I know Noel a long time. He's very, very astute in what he does. I think he's one of the best coaches, and maybe not managers, but he's definitely one of the best coaches I've ever seen on a training pitch. And I respect the hell out of what he's done in the game. However, I think he just got a bit stale. And one of the criticisms I would have of Noel is that he has a first 11 and he sticks to that almost religiously. He doesn't make the number of subs you would expect or you see other clubs making. I don't know how much he trusts the girls who are maybe 18, 19, 20 in the squad over maybe the girls who are in the 12, 13, 14, not specific jerseys, but you know what I mean, in his train of thought. He has his 11 and his couple of subs that he uses, and it's very hard to break into Noel's thinking if you're not in it from the off. And I think Christy Gray is a perfect example. For me, she's potential team of the year caliber performances, but she's only started 14 games. So across all competitions this year, which isn't enough in my opinion. She's played half the minutes that Maggie Pearce has, half the minutes that Kiva Keenan has, and yet when she's played, she's always looked dangerous. Yeah. And that's one example. I could give you 3 or 4 more. I think you named you didn't name Kayla Hamrick. I would have liked to have seen more of her this year. I definitely would have liked to see more Libby Moore.
I don't even know if she's still there. That's but that's what I mean. Like you look at I can't think of her second name. One brought in as well. Rue up top as well.
Mucherera, yeah.
You know, the players have just gone and come in and gone. What it reminds me of, and you talked about it so much last year, is Heather O'Reilly. That's exactly what it reminds me.
But Heather O'Reilly was a gimmick. I don't think these girls were gimmicks.
No, but what I'm saying is players just coming in, going. You know what I mean? And that sort of thing. And like you have to realize, and like Shells. People talk about Shells haven't been great this year. Shells have a massive underage structure at the minute. Like some of the players that are coming through in that underage teams, are just unbelievable, and they're getting better, and they're getting better regularly. Like that under 17s team won the double. The under 19s team lost the final to Wexford Youths, but you look at the Wexford Youths side that played that in that under 19s final. Ella Malloy scored. Ella Malloy played 90 minutes, and I think she played 70 or 80 minutes in that game. They won 4-0. Freya Manch, Jess Lawler, Anya Walsh, Claudine Keenan. There's so many players who have so much first-time experience playing in that sort of game, and like you look at the likes of them, and that's where I sort of have that little bit of a fear of too much influence from the outside in terms of other leagues or other things. When, like, don't get me wrong, when you get a player who's top quality and they come in and they make a massive difference and they make your team better, great. Because we've seen that with Maggie Pearce, we've seen that in glimpses with Christy Gray, we've seen it with Dana Sheriff, we've seen it with Maddie Gibson, we've seen it with other players like Jamie Erickson in Galway. Like, we've seen it with players that it's worked, but I just think sometimes clubs are too over-reliant on it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the two in Athlone and Jamie Erickson over in Galway, and you could add a few more to that in recent seasons. Her name escapes me now. She worked for Hot Press last year.
Emma Starr.
Yeah, she was at Galway, went to Shells. She was in the league for a couple of seasons. We've seen Maddie Gibson, we've seen Dana Sheriff. They're there for 2 years now, and Dana Sheriff is now talking about hoping to be Irish eligible and break her way into Irish squads in interviews this week. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. She's been impressive when she's played, and to hear players who've come in from the outside but have embraced life. We had Maddie on the show earlier in the year, and
Dana on earlier
in the year, and she has bought into the community. You know, she talked about how she worked in a coffee shop locally when she was injured.
I love that.
Most people would have just gone home and come back when she was fit. And to be buying into the community, I know they seem to be really bought into the club down there. Athlone are doing really, really good things. I'm really excited for what they're going to bring next year. I think there's a really exciting management team there now.
I'll go as far as saying this, and I'll say it on the record. If Maddie Gibson was if Dana Sheriff was fully fit at the start of the season, Dana Sheriff would have won Player of the Year. I really think so. Because if you look, if she look what she's done. Listen, Karen Duggan is going to win. For me, Karen Duggan has to win. That's
what I mean. I don't think anyone touches
Karen. But I think if Dana Sheriff had him in fit start of the season, Dana Sheriff scores 25 goals in that league easy. And
that's
then
a big statement.
That's a big statement. But I have no doubt about it. And that's being honest. I think she does do that.
Yeah, well, maybe she got 12 in effectively half a season, so it's not 13, should I say? But let's talk about that as well, because we've actually been distracted. We're still supposed to be talking about Peamount Sligo, so let's try and pull ourselves back. I know it's been a half hour of a tangent. Apologies to the listeners, or if you're watching this, we do get opinionated when we're getting into topics like this, because we're very passionate about the league, and I know we're two blokes, and sometimes the blokes get dismissed when it comes to the women's side of things. They like to hear the women's point of view, and I fully appreciate that. But we've been around the game for you over a decade, for me almost 2, and we know a lot of these players personally, but we also know a lot of the clubs and the politics and the stuff that doesn't get reported behind the scenes as well, and the individual little rows and tiffs and relationship breakups and breakdowns that happen between players and coaches and players and other players, and players moving around from club to club, and the tensions that bring as well. In terms of the game at Peamount, let's talk briefly about Peamount United, because I know we're going to see a team of the week announced next week at the awards. A team of the year, apologies. We're not going to get into it today. We will break it down next week after those awards and give our thoughts on who maybe made it, who didn't make it, who should have made it, who maybe was lucky to get in. But I think there's plenty of discussion that we'll be doing on that in the next 7 days or so. But in the meantime, Peamount United this year, we both had stuff out on our socials, at the WNL Show for you, and Final Whistle IE for us on Twitter or whatever over the last few days. And I think the story of Peamount, for me, I think they're front runners. They should be. They won't, because that's not how Irish sport works. But RTE Team of the Year, I don't think there's a better story in Irish sport this year than Peamount United. And they would hands down win that award for me. I don't think they will. I think the women's international soccer team might. And it's the only team I feel probably deserves. Actually, no, it doesn't deserve. I'll be straight up. Given the World Cup performance, they deserved it last year. I'm not so sure they actually deserve it this year, but they'll probably get it all the same.
No, they don't deserve it. And for me, I would love to see the FAI get in, roll in with a campaign to get Peamount nominated and then get Peamount to win that award, because the story is it's fascinating. And like, for everybody saying the dynasty's over, Peamount are done, Peamount aren't going to do this, Peamount are finished, Peamount might as well not put a team out this year. Like, I remember back when we were looking in last year, and you're looking, okay, Anya O'Gorman confirmed she's going. Steph Sambert didn't confirm until later on. Then all of a sudden, a tweet pops up. Yeah. I'm staying at Peamount. Once that tweet popped up, you knew, okay, Peamount are going to build a team, because I always had confidence with the fact that Karen Duggan, I was like, if Karen stays, I was like, okay, they'll probably keep the likes of Sive, they'll keep the likes of them. And like, for me, and I said it to James, I said it on the show, I said it to him at the weekend, it'd have been so easy for James just to turn around last winter and go, you know what? Listen, I've had enough. I've had 2 league titles. I've won an FAI Cup. I've given them my bests. But like, the magnitude of what they've done this year, how they've done it, like, it's been more impressive for the fact that they've ground out results at times where previous seasons they'd never get the result. They'd probably lose the game, but they're getting 3 points. I think that, to me, is probably it's a sign of everything. Like, I spoke to Chloe Maloney the other day, and it was nearly as if, you know, Chloe was probably nearly going to be, you could see the emotion on her, driving up from West Clare to train, had lost an All-Ireland final playing ladies football with Clare, and she talked about how this is our best sporting moment ever. And like, she's someone who had 3 National League titles. You know, she was a bit-time player in some of the other ones, a mainstay playing that Peamount team. Neve Burke winning her 6th Women's League of Ireland title, most successful player ever. Like, there's so many different stories in that Peamount team. We've talked about the 6 they lost, and they lose 2 other. Technically they lose 1, but they've lost 2 if you include Tara being injured and at the midway point. And like, it's just every time it's just the magnitude of it. It's, you know, for that group. I'm not I've been covering women's football for a long time. I have a lot of envy for that group, just to see, you know, you could see how much it meant to them and how special that moment was.
Yeah, for me, I spoke to a lot of the same players you did over the weekend, but I spoke to Jess Fitzgerald, youngster. She's still eligible for the underage team. She broke into the squad in the opening couple of games. She talked about the disappointment, and this kind of speaks to the character as well. She talked about the disappointment of not getting a minute in the first 2 appearances, and how she was really gutted not to be part of that. And I was like, kind of thinking to myself, like, at your age in this club, that's the norm. You'd be lucky to get 5 minutes through the season, never mind in the first 2 games. But once she got into the team, she kept her position and she was phenomenal. But she talked about the highlight for her in the year. I asked her about the highlights, and not the obvious ones like the winning the title or whatever, but the moments that she really enjoyed through the year. And she talked about Karen Duggan's goal against Wexford, last 10 minutes of the game, tight battle against a side that were expected to challenge for the title, and Karen Duggan popped up and stuck the ball in the back of the net and gave them the 3 points. And it's those 3 points and that kind of attitude where she realized that point, oh, hang on, we're in this to win this. We can actually go and do this. And you saw that confidence just grow through that squad. They lost Kate Mooney, who was top scorer in the league at the time. She went to the UK, and they replaced her with youngsters, you know, and the likes of Ellen Dolan coming in and having the impact she's had.
8 league goals for Ellen Dolan.
It's phenomenal in half a season, effectively, you know. And so we're looking at the next generation of players coming through. These girls are better. We've talked about this before on the show about how they're technically better. They've had way more experience at a much higher level week in, week out than the Karen Duggans of this world, then the Anya Gormans, the Steph Sambers of this world. Those girls were probably 4 years behind in their development. They had as much football played at 20 as these girls have at 17 or 18. And that speaks volumes to the quality that we're seeing in the international teams, despite some of the results we've seen this week with the under-16s. But also, we're looking at the quality of players coming through. And the under-17s and the under-19s are technically better than the girls playing in the senior league at the moment. I think they're going to pass them out as the seasons progress. And in the next 2 or 3 years, I think we're going to see lots of 20-year-olds playing and not that many 30-plus-year-olds playing. I think it's just they're not going to be able to make the teams.
Interesting thing on Jess Fitzgerald. There's a couple of times this season I've been in Peamount, and post-game I've watched James O'Callaghan, and I've watched him intently, where he goes over at the end of the game and he's coaching through a moment of the game. And she's there. You can see her taking it in. She's doing what he said, or she's mimicking what he says, whether it be a movement, and she's just taking everything in. And to me, like, even when you've won games, you're still having that conversation with your coach. How can I be better? That's the sort of thing that stood out for me an awful lot this year. Like, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but take the Galway game away. Peamount made loads of changes away to Galway. They sort of knew they had the league wrapped. Like, the couple of, I know they won't. Karen Duggan said it to me, but they won't say in a public. They won't really blame an excuse. But the players missing illness and stuff like that. 9 out of 10 games, apart from that Galway game, away from home, they won. Phenomenal.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal. And I think for me, the highlight of the season wasn't necessarily watching Peamount's path to the final. It was the atmosphere in in the club on Saturday evening, the whole way through, from before kickoff through the game. I'm a bit of a solitary animal. You know, it takes kind of a special kind of a human to get up on a bike for a year and a half with nobody with me, and I loved it every minute of it. I like being on my own. I don't necessarily like being in a crowd, even at sporting
Yeah,
events.
I got that on Saturday. I got
Yeah, I'm
that.
the guy who likes to be down the far end, just watching and analyzing myself and kind of and looking at things and watching players and just watching the game. And I stood beside Vinnie Patterson. He was there, obviously previously involved with the club. I was chatting to him for a few minutes. We got moved. It was ridiculous. The far touchline in Peamount, the half down as far as the gantry, had a thin line of people along it. There's a nice wide path, 2 meters wide-ish, plenty of space for anyone to get by. There was no obstructions. There was no nothing. And some guy from Pobby TG Cahir, or the production company, came along and said, nobody can be here. And they cleared half of the sideline.
Probably because of the commentary box.
It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. They should have had it boxed off at the start or left people. There was very little. Now, I'm sure insurance will tell you they did the right thing when they noticed, but people were annoyed. Everybody was just annoyed and looking at each other, kind of going, "Well, that's ridiculous." So I went like literally 180 degrees around the pitch to the far corner and watched it from the far corner. And as soon as I did, a gaggle of youngsters arrived around. All of us, 7, 8, 9. Great to see them at the game. Love seeing them there. Just don't want them 1.5 meters away from me, screaming at phones and at each other. And so I kept walking. I moved around again, and no sooner had I landed than they arrived. And a different batch, because the original batch was still where I'd left, and there was just kids everywhere. And from a personal point of view, it was a nightmare, but from a league promotional point of view, it was absolutely beautiful to see these kids coming along. Some of them Peamount players, very obviously Peamount players, others just fans, wanted to be there with their mates. The event was as much about them being out with their mates as it was about the football, and that's what you want at that age anyway, just to enjoy it.
Can we talk about the Guard of Honour?
I didn't see it.
So the Guard of Honour was done, so Sligo pretty much gave a Guard of Honour from about 10 meters from the center, about 15 meters, 20 meters from the center circle. Okay. That's where Sligo's Guard of Honour started. There was a Peamount youngsters, fans, family members, coaches from where the little entrance to the pitch is, out for about 35 meters on a diagonal of a Guard of Honour. It was absolutely brilliant.
I came in quite late, and there was a Guard of Honour from the dressing room to the tunnel as well.
Yeah,
on the far side. So now the tunnel is off-putting. That's just not. I find it creepy. I can only imagine what it's like when you're walking out there on a dark night to train, and there's bodies around everywhere, and I still found it a little bit creepy. But I know it's practical to get across the road or whatever safely, but they could do with some lights in that tunnel is all I'm saying. But the whole atmosphere from the night was brilliant. The end of the night, and this was the bit that I loved the most, was anyone who was involved with the team in any way, shape, or form, or the club at any level, was invited back inside to the clubhouse. A, they had the facilities to cater for it on site. B, it was a free bar. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that was the highlight. I don't drink, I'm teetotal, so it didn't bother me. I was driving anyway, so it didn't bother me in the slightest. And a lot of people were just there for the community of it rather than the free bar. But the idea that you were going to a club at that level and not been asked once, no one asked you to buy a raffle ticket, or maybe they did and they missed me, but nobody was asked to buy a raffle ticket. There was no raffle on the night. There was no request for money.
They had a cake sale on the far side, but they never once actually turned around, go buy some cakes. And actually, in fairness, I'm not going to lie, I must have spent about 15 quid on cakes because I had Andy with me and I had the sister. So they were like, we bought stuff there, but like, we were like, oh, lovely, there's something different. It wasn't even the fact that, oh, they were charity. But like, you know, and that's the thing I like about it. It's nothing like that. It's just sort of, it's go out there and like.
There was a couple of charity initiatives on the night. I know there was an autism. I think that might have been tied up with the cake sale as well. I saw a couple of players promoting that during the week. I think
Lauren O'Callaghan
was definitely involved in that. Yeah, but it was just a nice night. Nobody was asked to contribute anything financially. It was come in, we want to thank you, we want to give you a drink or two or whatever you feel like, really. There was no. I tried to pay for the first drink. I thought James was joking when he said it was a free bar. I thought he was just trying to get us to go in. So I went to pay for the first drink, and my friend goes, no, this is on me. one of the lads I used to work with, who I met at the game randomly, I didn't know he was going to be there. I won't name him for shaming him, but he goes, "Don't worry about it. It's on me. I've got a tab." And then the guy behind the bar laughs and just says, "No, it's all free anyway. It's grand." But it was just one of those nights where it was about the players, it was about the club, it was about celebration. There wasn't a take. It was all give. And for me, that's the beauty of having clubs like Peamount at this level in the game. I guarantee you wouldn't have seen that anywhere else. You might have been charged in somewhere else. There was definitely no free bar in any other club in the country at the end of the season, I can guarantee you. And it was just the atmosphere. Some of the speeches, I have to say, team of the year, Avril Brearley deserves to be in team of the year just for the speech she gave.
I don't know if you've read
one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life.
I don't know if you've seen Avril done a story where I think it might have been Emma Duffy in the 42 at the start of the year and talked about her highs and lows and the things outside of football and stuff like that. And to see someone like that, it was only fitting that Avril scored the last goal. It was only fitting, and
we won't talk about goalkeeping, but it was.
I don't know if you've seen the photo on our social media. I actually, because I wound Andy up. The glasses. I was like, they have to be fake. I was like, Andy, I thought he was messing. He put something in Photoshop or something when he was sitting in the car, and then he sends me a couple more, and it's like, I'm like, it's just typical. It's just Avril all over. And you know what? For people like that, people who've haven't had it easy in the league in terms of haven't always been a starter in clubs. Have always had to work hard to play minutes and things like that. When you see them sort of players get that recognition and that reward, because it's as much about the senior internationals, the future senior internationals who are going to go on and have accolades and have stuff like that. But for people like Avril, who has had to work extremely hard for everything she's got in football, it's a heartwarming in itself, and I can only imagine what the speech would have been like.
It turns out she lives with Karen Duggan, so she was the one that was selected to give the, I don't want to say an epitaph to Karen Duggan's career, but she was there to kind of a thank you to Karen. It was hilarious. Definitely character of the league for me this year, if not probably ever, in terms of the bit of crack. But she seems like she's good fun.
Well, she's also one of the nicest people. She's also, when she's not having a bit of laugh with you or something, she's also one of the nicest people you meet. That's the funny part of it.
And she stuck that goal in the back of the net very nicely on Saturday evening. The sixth goal, 6-1 winners, 2 from Jess Dolan. Let's get back to the game we're supposed to be talking about.
Jess Fitzgerald.
Jess Fitzgerald, Ellen Dolan with 2, Avril with the 6th, and the Aaron McLaughlin with the 4th goal on the night.
And then Emma Doherty with the Sligo goal.
Doherty, probably the best goal of the bunch, to be honest.
Rounded Nemo and tapped it into a net. I thought the breakaway was superb. I thought, and I was just delighted for Sligo because that's what they deserved. As much as it would have been great to see Nemo keep a clean sheet on the night she picks up her 6th medal. The fact that, Sligo didn't go away empty-handed for me was amazing. There's one thing we haven't mentioned. The likes of Nemo giving away her boots. She gave her shin guards away. She was walking around the pitch in her socks after being wet. I was just like, it just makes this league is just so special.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it the other night. Finally, on that game, and I said it to Tommy Hewitt at halftime when I bumped into him, I was impressed by Sligo. I genuinely was impressed by Sligo. I was down there at the end. They were defending in the first half, and I just thought they're a different outfit to what we saw at the start of this year and through most of last year when they kind of fell off a cliff in the middle of last season. They're harder to get through. They're harder to score against. Even though they conceded 6 in the end, they were much more solid than I've seen them in a long time. And I think to be fair to Steve Feeney, maybe the results haven't been phenomenal this year, but no more than Treaty, in the same way as they've improved, I think Sligo have improved under his tenure, especially since maybe the middle of last season when after that Shells game, they didn't win a game for a year. But now I think they're a much tighter outfit. And I think the find of Amber Hardy in goals is huge for them. I think she's only 16 or 17, but she looks about 23 or 24. She's a big frame. She's tall. She's well able, and she's mobile, and she looks fit, and she looks like a potential senior international if she sticks at it and gets the right path through her career, whether that's at Sligo or elsewhere, I don't know, but she's got a couple of exciting years ahead of her. And if Sligo can get a goalkeeper that's consistent week in, week out, we've seen flashes from Kristen Sample, we've seen flashes from some others. Amy Mahon has flattered to deceive at times. Bonnie McKiernan has looked very decent for them, but then they follow up a phenomenal performance with a poor performance the following week. And from what I've seen, two of the best goalkeeper performances I've seen this year are the two games that Amber Hardy has played in. The only two games she's ever played in the league. And I've been really, really, really impressed with her. If she gets a full season, Sligo could benefit by as many goals as Treaty did this year. They could, if they can cut out 20, 30 goals next season conceding, they could be a real threat.
But the only problem is they need to keep the Lockery sisters, they need to keep Emma Doherty, and they need to keep Casey Howe. I think keeping Emma might be difficult enough. I think they probably will keep Emma, but I think Casey Howe could be the difficult one to keep, a really, really hard one to keep.
It's hard to know, but she's vital to them, I think. And then don't forget Tommy Hewitt's coming in. That raises the question about the local Sligo and Leitrim girls who are playing with Athlone under him. Will Myrne Devaney coming with him?
Just to correct you, no, Tommy Hewitt is not coming in. Tommy Hewitt has started. Hewitt started at midnight. After that game, he was already talking about. He'd already got his things in his head. You could see the cog was already spinning. He already knew what he wanted to start. And I think for him, the most important thing is the next 6 weeks is the most important for Tommy Hewitt.
Yeah, but it's exciting times in Sligo. Let's move on from that game and let's try and actually talk about a bit of football for a change. Let's go down to Cork. Shell's in action down there. Brought out to Bishopstown. Facilities, again, not adequate for the League of Ireland. Let's be honest about it. It's not good enough. The pitch is in terrible condition. The angles for streaming the game, the fact that it's streamed at all is a huge plus to Cork City. Congratulations, well done to them.
Aaron Hoey deserves
That's
a lot.
Important. It's important that keeps going. They've never let the quality drop, even if the on-field stuff at times has been challenging. The off-field stuff has been important, and that's the sort of stuff I was talking about earlier in terms of the clubs really backing the teams. We've seen from Shells, and I don't want to single them out because they're not the only ones, but we've seen from Shells where the commentary isn't working or the camera's not working or there's no stream at all.
But what about the comments that are made towards the end of a stream as well when a random person comes in that asks their opinion, stuff like that? To me, LOI TV has probably been the biggest letdown this year for me. Some clubs have done it great. I think I wouldn't go so far as to say it's been the biggest letdown. It's been one of the biggest letdowns. It's also one of the biggest positives where it's done well. And 80 to 90% of it is done well. Let's be honest. Some of the commentary, and I know you've done some games. I'm not going to include you in that because you're here and you'll hit me through the whatever side I'm on. That's I'll just get you on Sunday.
yeah, absolutely. But the commentary across LOI for both men's and women's, I think it needs attention. I think in a lot of places it's excellent. I think the bias, I don't mind a little bit of bias. It's kind of always going to be built in. I don't mind if you're obviously a home team fan and you're 60 or even maybe 65 or 70% favoring your side. That's fine. But blatantly criticizing the ref every time your team gets a free or something given against them is not acceptable. It's not professional. And I listen, there are commentators out there who I think, and I don't want to name some without naming all that impress me, but there's definitely some out there who are as excited when their team concede as they are when their team score.
I'll name one or two for you. I'll be the one. I love Max Thompson at Peamount. I love Max's commentary. The only thing I wish for Max is I'd love Max to have a second co-commentator.
I love him, a second voice.
He's brilliant at what he does. I'd love him to have a second voice there. I'd love Peamount to bring that production on in Earley because. And the other thing is, I'd love to see like some Max do other teams' games. I know we talk about the lads in Athlone using first names and stuff like that, but they're quite they're sometimes biased, but they actually know what they're talking about. And I think that's as much as important because if people know what they're talking about, you can help and support the rest of the way. I don't know if you've seen it, but I know Royal Nugent put out a call recently for a female to help.
It was sent to me by some of our female team members here at Final Whistle, and let's just say the commentary on it was not the most positive from the women that he's probably targeting. They just felt it was tokenism. There was no job offer. It was just, I'm going to get you ready for job offers. And the sentiment coming back from, again, female members of our team was he had the opportunity to do that when he was head of sport in RT and chose not to. So it's too little too late from Royal Nugent was the impression that they got from it. He could have done something like that 10 years ago when he had the power to really make that change, and he chose not to. We look now at what's on RT for international games, and it's almost 30-40% on men's games, women's commentators, and it's almost 100%. Apart from, I think, Richie Sadlier is the only one I can think of that did. Did Stephen Kelly do a couple of the men's games? You were out of the country. You were off swanning yourself in Australia. But it was women commentators. We brought in girls from England. We brought in girls from Scotland. We had a range of Irish international players.
I know Steph done the commentary for all the Ireland games in the World Cup because she was based in.
Oh, I'm talking. But even in the studio, you had Maeve Burke, you had Megan Campbell, you had
Jessica Ferry's done a couple of games. For me, I enjoy listening to Jessica's commentary. I think when she listen, her and Joey and Dal when they do Sligo Hours games, sometimes could go.
Always a challenge,
It's brilliant. I love it.
But I the first time was funny. It got very tiring. Like when you start calling Greg Bulger the doctor and repeating it, same joke 27 times, it just got a little bit much for me. But I do love Joey. He's great crack in person. We were at a game maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Joey would have been in his mid-50s or mid-40s at the time. Got it. Sorry, Joey. It would have been in his mid-40s at the time, if not a little bit older. And Sligo were poor. They were getting beaten at the gate by somebody. And we joked with Joey sitting 2 or 3 seats down from us. Did he have his boots? Could he play the second half? And he said, if you give me the gate, the entire gate, whatever you took in on the gate, I'll play one game. And I was just like, oh, yeah, that Joey hasn't lost it anyway. But he's a great character, but I can't handle him on the commentary. I know he's popular, but not in my world. In terms of the games, Shells, Cork, was that a poor end of season Cork performance, or let's just shake out the cobwebs and prove we still have the ability to put a team away from Shells?
Probably a bit of both. More of a poor Cork. Noel obviously made a couple of changes. Hannah Healy getting on the score sheet. I think Michelle's viewpoint, I think that's an important win. The magnitude of the win as well is probably quite important as well going into that cup game, because I know the bookies will make Shells favourites, but for me at the minute, in terms of actual pure football form, I would probably say I fancy Athlone more in the cup. So I think for Shells, this was an important performance. Christy Gray with another 2 goals as well. Like it's been a good end of the season. I think Shells will be happy to get second place into a cup final, an opportunity to give Noel King a send off.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. Then, of course, we'll talk maybe later about how they managed to get second place with that result as well, which I think is probably a key thing for them. I know it's not. I know what to say. If you're not first, you're last. But I think Shells will be happy enough with how the season finished up, given second place.
Come on! All Shells and all Peamount fans are delighted the Shells finished second. And it's been all over social media the last couple of days. There's no point in hiding it.
Well, let's look at the table for a second while we have it. Peamount Shelburne, top of the league. And I suppose if you were being cynical, you would say they both lost the guts of half a dozen top players, first frontline players, first team regulars to Shamrock Rovers this season. I think there'll be a lot of people in Peamount and Shelburne who'll be quite happy that they're both ahead of Shamrock Rovers at the end of the season.
Oh yeah, 100%. And there's no doubt that was in a lot of people's minds. And you could even see the reaction from Peamount people on Saturday evening when they heard that Athlone had got the 4th goal to equalise. The people were happy. People were delighted.
I happened to be in the company of Karen Duggan.
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to say it, but I did see it.
I'm not going to say what she said because that's not fair. Because she didn't say it in a public setting, but I happened to be in the vicinity where she was standing there and found out that Athlone had scored 4, and that it was Dana Sheriff that had scored twice to win the Golden Boot as well. And as she said, as a few of them said to me after the game, off the field there's no rivalry; they're all mates. Do you know what I mean? The girls
on the field there's a massive rivalry.
Oh, on the field there is. And this happened on the field, so it stays on the field.
It's the same in every club, though, Breifne, because you look at the players in Shelburne and Peamount on the pitch, they probably hate each other. But off the field, you'll see a lot of them are very good friends. Even the girls who went from Shelburne to Shamrock Rovers, a lot of them are still friends with each other. It's football, and that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, I think Karen Duggan would happily have paid for the Golden Boot for Dana Sheriff. Not against Anya, but just about the whole thing in general. It was just the way it all worked out. But that was pretty eventful as well. Let's jump to that game. Shamrock Rovers 4-1 up against Athlone with 20 minutes to go. It looked like it was a dead duck. It looked like Athlone had just kind of turned off and said, we've got the cup final. We don't really care what happens outside of that. And then all of a sudden, I suppose it kind of became that lady, Dana Sheriff's performance, but a full team performance from Athlone. They pulled themselves back in. Game finished 4-4 with that third minute of injury time equalizer from Sheriff to not only deny Shamrock Rovers second place in the table, but also win the Golden Boot by a single strike from Anya Gorman, who'd only taken the lead in that competition in the first half of the game. It's mad.
Mental, absolute mental. But I wouldn't mind.
Second half
I actually said it. I said it to a few people, and I even said it to Tommy Ewa. I said, I fancy Athlone to get something out of that Shamrock Rovers game. At 4-1 down, I'd have laughed a bit, I'd have laughed if they said, "Oh, they're going to come back and finish 4-all." I'd be like, never go away. And even when I heard it was 4-2, heard it was 4-3. When I heard it was 4-all, I thought people were messing. I thought people were actually just on the wind up, and that's been genuinely. But like, it just shows the resilience from Athlone. They've been on a great run of form. I think for them, it's probably it's a big point for the fact that they played Rovers in Tala the week before they played Shells. They're bad. The last time they played in Tala in a league game, in a cup game, they were beaten 2-0 by Shelbourne in a game that they probably shouldn't. They probably on the second half alone, they probably shouldn't have lost. They should have. They had lots of chances. Whereas if Scarlet Herons one goes in, it's probably a different game. So I think for them, it was important to sort of get something from that. Builds up into this weekend, which is exciting. But I think from a Shamrock Rovers viewpoint, publicly they'll probably say happy enough third place cup semi-final. Privately, I can't imagine they'll be happy with that.
No, they won't be happy with that at all. Does it change anything ahead of the cup final for Athlone psychologically to have had that comeback, be in such fine form against arguably, let's be honest, one of the top sides in the country? Despite third place, they're still one of the top sides. Only lost one game all season. That can't be denied either. Like,
don't know if it doesn't change an awful lot, but it definitely gives them confidence. It definitely gives them, the understanding that they can go to Tala. They know they have a bit of familiarization in it. We often see in other sports where teams will tend to train in the game before the stadium before the cup final, where they've had a great opportunity to play there the week before, albeit a different opposition. But the thing is, they're coming in against the Shell side. For me personally, and some people won't like this, but I think from a football viewpoint, in terms of the Women's League of Ireland, the league needs an Athlone win more than it needs a Shelbourne win. But as much as that, I'm not a Shelbourne fan, but I'd still love to see the likes of Pearl Slattery lift the FAI Cup again. I think Pearl's been a massive ambassador for this league. But then again, I'd love to see Larry Ryan get her hands on a cup for Athlone. Like, I definitely do think the league needs an Athlone win even more. But from just the relationships with like some of the Shells players that are built over the year, it's a tough one.
How much does the managerial appointments in Athlone now take effect this week, given the connections that both men in charge of, I suppose, Athlone have had with Shells in their own playing careers and their own coaching careers?
Coaching wise, I don't think an awful lot from terms of Kieran Culduff, but I definitely think from Ken Kiernan, for sure, he'd know a lot of the Shelbourne players. He'd know a lot of their good traits. Like, I was talking to Ken before was it Sligo? No, what was the game last week when they played their last home game, Shell's last home game. Can't even think of the team now. Bows, and he was telling me like himself and Kieran, they tend to they get involved a bit with the training and stuff, and like even he was blown away by some of the standard of some of the Athlone players on what they're actually able to do. And like, for me, I think yes, Ken would know a few, but then again, the other side of it is, some of the others might know Ken's coaching style. There's not a lot you can read into. The problem is Kieran and Ken can only put 11 players on the pitch and whatever subs they want to put on. It's up to the players on the pitch to deliver. And we know Shells are players who deliver in big moments. Like the Rovers Cup semi-final for me was a massive moment in Tala, whereas everybody wrote Shells off massively after what happened the week before in the league. And then for them to come back and do what they did, I think, it sets them up. They've been in good form since that as well. So, like Shells go in here as deserved bookies' favourites, but I think on form there's not a lot between the two sides.
In terms of the cup final at the weekend, we could potentially, so let's say Athlone were to win the final at the weekend, we'd have three different clubs winning the three main competitions this year. which is positive. I suppose if Shells were to win, we'd have 4 if you include the President's Cup, and for one of them not to be Shamrock Rovers, given the investment and the buzz that came in, and you talked about the comment. Listen, we can't not talk about it. I know Shamrock Rovers fans have been slagging off Declan Devine all week about the comments he made about bringing the cup back to Dalymount. They're going to have to eat it a little bit, like you said, in terms of what they said at the start of the year about raising the standards. We could, in theory, if the bookies' favourites do come through and Shells win that game at the weekend, have 4 different cups, all won by 4 teams in the league, and not one of them is Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough to take if you're involved with that.
But forget about the President's Cup for a second. If Shamrock or if Shells win the cup, to have Peamount and Shelbourne win the league and the cup, considering how decimated they'll be, that'll be a massive kick in the teeth. You know, forget Galway winning the Avenir, because I think Galway winning the Avenir is massive. And I think when we do our end of season, we'll spend a lot of time talking about that, because I think that's important to really raise Galway and what they've done. Tommy Ewan, when he was with Athlone winning the President's Cup, I think that's brilliant. I think it's great that Athlone won the first one. But for me, with the comments that were made, I think if Shells win the cup and Rovers win and Peamount win the league, that'd be the biggest kick in the nuts to Shamrock Rovers, because they took nearly 6 players nearly from each team.
I think it was 4 or 5, but yeah, it's
you know,
by mid-season they had taken another 1 or 2, I think, from a couple of them as well. Like it was a big draw on their team, but it's the quality of the players they took. They took the high-profile ones. They took the girls with international senior experience. There must have been 6 or 7 senior internationals drawn to Tala, and it hasn't quite worked out for them. I still think if they keep the investment levels up, and I know Colley's a phenomenal coach, and I think the players they have, and I'm looking at the quality coming through. I know they've 2 nominated for Young Player of the Year. I'm not so sure that I made my shortlist for the top 3 players in the country. I personally would have seen Aoife Kelly in there from Shamrock Rovers, and then I probably would have had a selection of players from other clubs around the country. I think Jenna Slattery would have been a good shout. I think Emma Doherty or Casey Howe would have been a good shout from Sligo Rovers.
Roisin Malloy for me.
Roisin Malloy, I don't think Roisin Malloy is eligible. I think she's a year too old.
No, she's still for the FAI one. I think she's still eligible.
Just
21.
Yeah, she would have been under 17 in 2018, so I think she might be a couple of months over age, but I'm not quite sure. But the point stands. There are others as well. I think Eva Mangan would have been worth a shout from Cork as well. These are really good, impressive players in weak sides. It's much harder to be impressive in a weak side than in a side packed with full of international experience. And I think that's why I would have gone for one of them had I been asked my opinion in terms of how that works. But listen, we are where we are. The 3 girls nominated, for me, there's only one winner. And I no disrespect to the Shamrock Rovers girls, but I think there's only one winner in that category. There's only one winner in the Player of the Year category, and there's only one winner in the Manager of the Year category.
I know we say there's only one winner in the Player of the Year category, right? And I know I've thrown my hat in for Karen, but I'm not going to lie and say this. I wouldn't be at all shocked if Sive Doyle has got a lot of support on that. I wouldn't be, and to be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me, because Sive Doyle is just, for me, I have Sive Doyle right up there on the pedestal with Karen Duggan in terms of ability. I do think Karen, for me, has just edged it, but they've been neck and neck for so much of the season. I wouldn't be at all surprised if a curveball was thrown. I
think you could have picked Karen Duggan and any 2 players from the Peamount starting 11. I think you could have put up for that nomination, and they wouldn't have been out of place. I think Erin's possibly a little bit lucky to be in there. I'd like to have seen Niamh Reid Burke get it. I think she's been a phenomenal addition in a full-time capacity over the last 2 years, because she kind of shared the role with Nisha McAloon for a couple of seasons, and it's great. She's back in. The delight when I asked her about winning the Golden Gloves, the sheer joy that came across her face, because for 2 or 3 seasons, Peamount had more clean sheets than everybody else, but because they were split between the 2 keepers, they both missed out, and somebody else kind of snuck in and played twice as many games and got 2 extra. Got 11 clean sheets, and the 2 girls had 7 or 8 each. It was just, it didn't make sense how they worked.
Amanda Budd won it last year. I think Amanda Budd won the last 2 years.
Yeah, but didn't have as many clean sheets as the 2 combined at Peamount. And not that I'm not trying to lower Amanda Budden's achievement in winning it.
I think Amanda's had a very good season this year, actually. I think it's probably been her best season in the National League, and that's to her credit. I think she's gone to Rovers. She's done very well for them. But for me, like when I talked to Nemo, it was as if a school kid was winning their first League of Ireland title again. Yeah, that's what I got from it, and that's the buzz and the excitement.
I got that from the whole squad the other evening.
Yeah.
Before we do wrap up, we're over the hour. We're always going to be over the hour today, I think, given the way that the show started. Bows and Treaty, 1-0 win for Bows.
Did you see the penalty incident?
Pardon?
Did you see the penalty incident?
No. So much happened this week. I've missed.
Anne-Marie Uliak comes through the back of, I think it was Katie Malone. She goes to catch the ball, drops the ball. As you just see keepers coming and the player gets taken out. Referee Mark Lynch gives the penalty. My social media hasn't stopped. You don't often see them given because the goalkeeper's coming to get the ball. She clearly does. She clears out the defender, but that's when the goalkeeper normally gets it because she's into her box. If she jumps it, I think if she catches it, he probably lets her away. I think it's one of them that you don't see it given very often. But from a treaty viewpoint, when they haven't got many decisions go their way this year, and then that goes away against you, and Mia Dodd scores, and you lose 1-0, it's probably a bit of a bitter pill to take in that sort of sense. And it wasn't the greatest game of football either. Bows are just looking to see that season now. It's been an absolute atrocious second half of the season for them. That's their only win apart from the Cabinteely game in the FAI Cup. And they've struggled for performances.
Absolutely. Final game as well. We'll give that about as much credit as it deserves because, as you said, it was a real end of season fair to it. You could see that kind of going in as well, and where there was goals flying in everywhere else, only the one penalty, not a great game. The final game was Wexford and Galway, and potentially the last game in FAI Cup, but I reckon we'll get another season out of that. But definitely the last game is Wexford Youths. Will it be the last game for some of their players? There's a couple of players in that squad that have been around. They're well into their 30s.
I can't imagine. Kylie Murphy will play until the legs are gone.
Are the legs already though? Is my question.
No. Kylie's like a Rolls Royce. Kylie just continue to come along. I think when Wexford play well, Kylie plays really well. From this viewpoint, though, Abby Callanan, Abby has a habit of scoring on the last day of the season. Scored 2 in 2021 against Peamount. Never forget the depth chip she got over Nevria Burke and down the far ends. Went to, I think it was to equalise, and that night when they won 5-2. From a Galway viewpoint, it's just a great way to finish the season. A commanding 4-0 win on the road to Wexford. What more can you want for Phil Trill's side? I think I've probably been a little bit disrespectful earlier when I didn't mention the buzz that's the one I said Shamrock Rovers brought a buzz, because I do think Galway have been really good for the league this year, and I think for the fact that the rebranding has worked, I think the social media guys in Galway this year have been actually very good. Some of the behind the scenes content and stuff like that they've actually delivered. I think they've given bang for buck to their fans. They've tried to get as many fans in as possible. They've tried to push for crowds and stuff like that. I think there's been a lot of positives from Galway off the field as much as on the field, and I think they've taken a step forward in the right direction. I'm just going to leave right now. I'm just going to walk away, because I remember what I said at the start of the season about Galway, that I thought with the signings they've made, they could probably finish down in the bottom 2 or 3. So
would you like some humble pie? I've got a couple of
just a little bit. I think a little bit of humble pie is deserved there, because fair credit to Phil Trill, his management team, and the Galway players, because I think they've put up with a bit this year in terms of, start the season. They won 1, lost 1, losing games 1-0, winning games 1-0. The goal that they scored against Cork from Jenna Slattery when the ball bounced over the goalkeeper's head, got a little bit of lucky break. The All-Ireland Cup does no doubt fully deserve to win it. They gave the competition a great crack and to come out victorious. And I think they've had a decent enough second half of the season. And, I think fair play to them. Finishing 4th place in the league, have to be really happy with that.
Absolutely, and I think when you look down through the sides, let's just take a quick look down at the various statistics from across the league this year. Dana Sheriff was obviously top scorer in the league, 13 goals, but more importantly, only 11 starts in that. She's struggled with injury at times.
Breifne, 600 minutes, over 600 minutes less than Anya Gorman.
Yeah. 9 games exactly. 9 games exactly in terms of time. 6:30. Sorry, 7 games exactly. My maths are a bit off.
Wow.
7 full games less than Anya in terms of minutes on the pitch, and I think that's huge. And even 130 minutes less than Kate Mooney, who impressed at the start of the year. We were raving about her for 6 months, and she got a move to England out of it. So we're looking at a player who's declared for Ireland, who wants to play for Ireland, and I think I wouldn't be surprised to see her edge into squads in the next 6 months with Ireland if she stays around and stays committed to the cause. I think she's worth a shot. She adds something in terms of physicality and technical ability that we've seen from Kira Carusa, and she could be a direct replacement for Carusa in terms of injuries, or that Carusa obviously number one at the moment, but interesting to see how that pans out over the next few months and such. Anya Gorman, of course, on 12, a dozen goals for her. She's such a legend of the league and deserves every bit of respect, but I suppose the way the season panned out for her, she'd be disappointed not to have sealed that out with 30 minutes to go on Saturday evening. Kate Mooney 9, and then a glut of players on 8 goals for the season. Maddie Gibson, of course, Sheriff's teammate in Athlone, she played in the cup final as well this week. Ellen Dolan impressed in the second half of the season, particularly with Peamount. You mentioned Jenna Slatter, and we've raved about Christy Gray all season. Emma Doherty with 7 for Sligo Rovers, and arguably a very weak Sligo Rovers side in terms of the league table. That's an impressive haul from her as well. I know if I go down a little bit further, her teammate Casey Howe has 6 in the league, another 5 in the cup for both of them each, or 5 or 6 maybe in the cup for those girls as well. So overall in the entire season, a lot of them came against Bonagee in the non-league stage of the cup. So you take with a bit of pinch of salt, but they did still find 5 goals each in that particular clash. But there's some big names in there. Very impressive performances from them all season. In terms of the keepers, we talked about Niamh Reid Burke. I think I might be missing a clean sheet for Rachel Kelly. She did end up on 9 on that, so our system might be a little bit behind on that. But Courtney Maguire on 8, Eve Badana and Amanda Budden with 7 each, and then a lot of faces there. Katie Keane coming into her own in the second half of the season, impressed greatly with Athlone. She'll probably start in the cup final at the weekend, and I know it looks small in terms of the number of starts, but Anne-Marie Uliak, 2 in 20 starts for Treaty. A lot of single goal defeats there as well.
A lot of less goals conceded.
Yeah, when you
that's the biggest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me is huge when you look at the number of games Treaty played, or the number of wins and defeats Treaty had this year versus last year, but particularly the cup or the league's the goals conceded. If I can talk, I'll be doing really, really well. Just if we take a look back at the league table with Treaty highlighted on that this year. Let me just make that full screen for a second. Then Treaty, they conceded 50 goals this year in 20 games. Last year 50 in 20 games. Last year that's the wrong division, Women's National League. It was 110. Now, obviously, they played an extra 7 games, so it's not quite double, but it's close to double. So cut your
50 goals in 20 games, an average of 2.5 goals per game. Whereas if you look at that last year, the average is what?
Just under 4.
You know what I mean? That in itself speaks.
Over 4.
And the thing is, Anne-Marie Uliak has probably been as busy this year as she was last year, as the goalkeeper was last year. That's the interesting side of it.
Yeah, no, it's madness. But I think a lot of positives down there in Treaty, and I think I'm excited to see where that goes. But I'm excited to see where a lot of teams go. I think Wexford have a big opportunity, maybe not next season, but definitely over the next 2 or 3 years if the facilities come on stream. And it's an exciting time to be following the League of Ireland Women's Premier Division and the teams and the players in it. And there's a couple of hiccups. We've talked about LOI TV, we've talked about the facilities a little bit, and I was disappointed. As good as the experience at Peamount was the other night, everything off the pitch is phenomenal, everything on the pitch is phenomenal, but around the pitch is not great. There's not really adequate toilet facilities, there's not really proper covered seated area for the level of crowd that they should be now expecting at games.
That's
the access,
the biggest thing.
The access and parking is also a massive problem as well for games at this level. There's no real public transport alternative. You kind of have to drive out to PRL Park. And as much as I'd love to see Peamount stay out there, it really does need investment from probably the FAI is the only one really that's there at this stage to help them with that, because the club just don't have the resources, I'm guessing, of some of the bigger names.
The problem, Breifne, is if they do want to stay in the league, their facilities are going to have to improve. That's the biggest thing. And I've said this on the record. I said it to James the other night. It's like, that's the biggest thing for Peamount is if they want to be a women's only self-sufficient, they're going to have better facilities. They're going to have adequate facilities. The problem is the FAI with licensing probably should be requesting more, but I think the request for licensing is that you have 200 seats. I think that's the current request. That's that little stand facilitates. But like there's things like if there's nothing else, it's a difficult one. Like, because Peamount as a club, like, you know what, some of the people like Dennis Cummins for me in particular, when you see him pictures of him holding up the League of Ireland trophy at the weekend, that sort of thing fills you with joy, because you know what, Dennis is all about the women. Dennis loves the women's team. they're nearly like his own children. And when you see things like that, so for Peamount to be sustainable, and stay in the league, they're going to need better facilities. And maybe it is a case that they're going to have to look into something. But I'm sure pressure will come on from the likes of the FAI over the next couple of years as well to do something about that. And that could be the ultimate downfall of Peamount United, is facilities. But the thing is, when you look at Peamount, you see how much that title means to them. You see how much it means to people like Dennis Cummins, the chairman of Peamount, Mr. Peamount. You see the pictures of him, with Louise Quinn. Every time Louise Quinn comes back to the club, things like that. You see him holding a trophy. Like, he idolises them players nearly like his own child. And you can see how much it means to them. And like, you look at the buntings around, you look at everything around. We talked about the Guard of Honour earlier, talked about all that sort of stuff. But the problem is the facilities aren't. You're right, the facilities aren't great. Like, is that facility really capable of what sort of crowd they had at the weekend? Probably not. It didn't help with the fact that
but probably not.
It didn't help with TV, the TV gantry obviously being put up and all that sort of stuff, because that stuff's not normally there. The LOI TV cameras are on the side where we were, so that sort of stuff, and people tend to funnel down and that sort of stuff. But I think ultimately in the long term, this could be what is the detrimental with Peamount United is facilities. Yes, they have a great dressing rooms, they have a great upstairs facilities and stuff like that. But I even said to James O'Connell, that's probably going to be the biggest thing for Peamount the next couple of years is how do they find facilities? Because the FAI are going to get stricter and stricter and stricter on licensing. I didn't want to say this, but I am going to say it. You'll never see Cork City men playing a League of Ireland game in Bishopstown. So I hope the FAI will eventually turn around to Cork City and say, listen, the women's game isn't being played there. I'd have much preferred to be played in somewhere like a Middleton or played in an actual facility that's better facilities. But I do think that'll be the ultimate downfall of Peamount United in the years to come, is that, yes, they're probably facilitating licensing now when it comes to things like the seats with the 100 seats. But what, as you say, press facilities, you're standing on the side, or like, I had an umbrella in the bag. That's how, I'm prepared to come to Peamount. I had the warm clothes on just to stay warm and things like that. Just unfortunately, when you go out there isn't nothing there. As you said, like, there's no transport, there's no nothing. You have to drive. And for the club to progress, they're going to need to have that sort of investment. Maybe they're going to need to catch into capital grants from the government and stuff like that to push the facilities on. Because realistically, I'd love to see a self-sustaining women's team. I'd love to see Peamount continue to do what the Glasgow City women do and push on and things like that. But if the facilities aren't up to date, they're not going to be able to do that. And that's probably going to be the biggest thing to hold Peamount back in the years to come. And I do have a fear for Peamount because of that. But I do hope that they get support, and they're great for women's football. Their underage academies are brilliant. The stuff they're doing, the players that churning out through the gates. This is probably the youngest average age Peamount team, I'd say, this year in a number of years, since the likes of Lauren O'Callaghan, Niamh Farrelly and Lucy McCartan and all made their debut years ago. And that's the sort of, they're just funneling them players through, and they're really important for the growth and future of Irish football, women's football. But unfortunately, the facilities just aren't there.
I shouldn't have smirked about when you mentioned the sports capital grants, but given the revelations that have come out of the FAI in the last 7 days, it could be a while before soccer clubs get those as well. We're back. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and hopefully that's not quite to the same level as we've seen before in the FAI. I don't believe it is, but I do think it needs to be kind of sorted out and made sure that the sport as a whole is given the footing that it deserves in the community and in the Irish society in general. In terms of the weekend, let's finish up because we've gone way over time, but I think it's that time of year we'll kind of indulge ourselves a little bit. Cup final at the weekend. It's a repeat of last year. We know how that finished. Shells won the trophy, won the double. It means a bit more to them this year because they don't have that league title sewn up. It's Noel King's last game in charge of the side. A very changed Athlone team as well. Not so much with Peamount or with Shells, although there are a few. Your thoughts on what we can expect from the game?
I think, to be honest with you, Breifne, it could be a firefight again. I think it could be either a dull game or it could be a firefight. I think both sides are going to want to impress. Both sides are want to stamp their authority on the game. I think whoever gets that, the Athlone front five is deadly. It's lethal. Shell's wingers are lethal. Maybe Noelle Murray probably isn't having the best of season up top, but she's still scoring vital goals for them. I think from a Shell's viewpoint, Shell's can't afford to concede early. If Shell's concede early, it could be a difficult day for them. I think from an Athlone viewpoint, they definitely want to right the wrongs from last year. I think that's really important from them. They know where they messed up. They know where they didn't deliver the performance. I'm hoping for another big crowd, another big day at Tala. I know the West Stand is nearly all gone. I think they're halfway down the east stand as well. There's a few tickets left in the south stand, so there is still tickets available, but they are going and they are moving. So we're looking, we could potentially have another record crowd at a women's cup final like we did last year with the two sides, and I think that would be a great way to cap off the season and to sort of end it on a high. Who's going to win? I don't really know. I think if I was to put the money on it, I'd sort of be leaning towards Athlone, but I don't want to. You never want to write Shelburne off.
In terms of, you mentioned the ticket sales, in terms of the success over the last two cup finals, this one and then last year, was it the right decision to move it to Tala?
Listen, I love it being in the Aviva, but I hate it being in the Aviva. Because the problem is it's too hard to get neutrals to the game. How can you expect someone to come to a game at 12 o'clock or 12 or 12:45 and then stay for a men's game at 4 o'clock? Used to hate doing it in terms of working at the games. You know, you're there, it's cold. Whereas in Tala, it's sort of you're in, you're out. Like for me, realistically, we should be aiming to sell Tala out. Sell out at 10,000 when the new stand is ready. Sell out once or twice. Then let's go back to the Aviva, see can we get 15, 20,000. Push on, build on. And you know, like when we're ready to go there, that we're not going there and it looks crap, it doesn't look great on TV, that's when it's time to go back. Likewise, we'll see the Irish women's team go back to the Aviva next year. I've no doubt they'll play several of them League A games in the Aviva. So, you know, it's a massive 12 months, I think, for women's football in Ireland in terms of attendances. And it's about, can the FAI continue to capture their public and actually get the public out to vote with their feet and come and watch the women's game? That's the big question.
To be fair, in the last 7 days, we've seen three really impressive games back-to-back over the weekend. The playoff final in Tala Stadium on Friday night was an excellent watch for any neutral, and even for the two clubs involved. Even Cork, after getting relegated, I think the actual performance was exceptional from both. The women's final round of games all day Saturday was, the amount of goals in was brilliant, but it was great to watch it, even though there was no jeopardy really in place. To see the goal of the season or the top scorer cards go to the last, change hands in the last half hour of the games, to see Shells do it in such style, or Peamount and Shells win in such style. Galway really set the bar as well for them coming into next season. And then the cup final was exceptional again on Sunday. A sold out, almost sold out at least. The sold out banners were definitely up in the Aviva on Sunday. I think, as much as I'm critical of the FAI, and I am critical of the FAI a lot, but I have to say they've done some really good work within the league and domestic football, men's and women's this year. There's a few things need to be talked about. We've talked about them, the LOI TVs and all that sort of stuff. But I think last weekend, despite what some influencers might be saying on Twitter this week and the blow-ups, I think the FAI deserve a huge amount of credit for the work that's gone in recent years in terms of sanitizing the League of Ireland and making it kind of sexy again.
100%. I think the FAI, I think some of the clubs deserve an awful lot of credit. Some clubs can still do an awful lot more to help and grow. But I think the FAI are going in the right direction. I think that the renewing of the sponsorship with SSE Electricity as well is another positive. We're going to have a marquee sponsor over the Women's League for next year. Over the new branding for me has been a massive success. Like you see, the men have one color for the Premier Division, the First Division, and then the women have the different color. I think it's great. It's all under the same logo. Everything's under the same website. There's so much more for the FAI to build in the next couple of years, but it's taken a massive step forward across the board. And I think the women's football have benefited this year 100%.
I think also another thing that's really impressed me this year is the speed. And probably more so on the men's side than the women's side of the highlights going up. The men's, it's within maybe 2 or 3 hours of the final whistle. For women, it's probably the next day, but it used to be 3 or 4 days for both. It used to be Monday or Tuesday before they went up last year. Now they're up in a timely fashion where you can actually watch it in as you'd want to watch it, if that makes sense.
Although I am going to be critical. When games haven't been streamed on LOI TV, we haven't got highlights from them games. It's the only thing I will say, and we have to balance it out a little bit there. Yeah. But I do think a lot of what the FAI doing is great, and it's positive. It's moving in the right direction. And I think the thing about the media department, when it comes to the League of Ireland, they've got some people who actually care about the League of Ireland. 100%. I think that's probably the most important thing there, is they care about it and they want to see it grow.
The one asterisk I will say about the highlights, and it's just a personal bugbear, I think it's great. What's there is great. 9 out of 10. I just miss it's goals only, and I think it needs to be more than just goals only. I think there needs to be a bit more effort put in terms of maybe having people analyze those games, and even, like, God forbid, there are plenty of services out there. Finalwhistle.ie is one of them, but there are others that actually clock these events in real time. you can go back and get that information and add it to, like, it shouldn't be that difficult to go back and get those clips and make what's now maybe 60, 70, 80-second highlights package into 2.5 to 3 minutes with sending offs. I know they're negative, but yeah, it's part of the game. Missed penalties, which don't seem to appear at all, or the build up to a penalty in terms of how that penalty is awarded. The major talking points. There's a goal disallowed, that should be in there as well. I know they don't like a courting controversy, but I think it needs to be in there. If it's going to be a real, you need to show the bad with the good. That's what people gets people talking. More people talk about a bad VAR decision in the English league than they do about the ones they get right. So let's give them the warts and all. Let's let people see the bad side with the good side. There's way more positives than negatives. So let's highlight the positives by identifying the negatives, in my opinion.
100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. But I'll definitely say everything this year has been a massive step on in the right direction.
Again, it's 9, if not 9.5 out of 10 improvement this year. I think kudos to everybody down in Abbottstown in terms of the work they've put in. And
is it down or up for you, or is it across?
Kind of a bit of everywhere, but you know what I mean. I was going to say down somewhere else, but I changed it to Abbottstown in the last minute. But I think the clubs deserve huge credit. Some of them have really stepped up to the plate. There's not a lot for the rest to do to get to that level as well, but I think it's definitely all going in the right direction. And I had the good fortune. I did the commentary co-coms on the Avenir Sports Cup Final. You've done a couple of games in the men's and women's leagues this year, and it's nice to kind of see the improvement and the investment in the game. And I think it's only going to get better. We've seen massive deals in the UK for the Women's Super League. We've also seen new broadcast deals in the NWSL as well. And I think there's an opportunity there for the Women's League to grow. I personally think LOI TV with proper investment is the route forward. I think it'll generate the most money for the league.
Remember this.
Develop that.
When TG Carr first came in with 4 games. 12 games this year they've shown.
Yeah. But I think it's been a huge success, and the underdogs is part of that as well. And I think the World Cup can't be underestimated in terms of, okay, we might be not too happy with how everything turned out around the World Cup in terms of the management situation. The performances weren't what we would have liked them to be in terms of results. But I think it's, in terms of bringing the sport to the next level, it's been a huge step. We've 1 foot in the Euros in 12 months' time, and that is a massive step forward as well. And I think it's exciting times for the league, for the team at national level, and some of the individual players who've really been putting on a shining light this year. Katie McCabe getting nominated for the Ballon d'Or, been in the running for the Ballon d'Or, even if she didn't quite feature in the upper levels of it. It's a huge step forward. Kira Carusa been involved, has made a huge impact in her first season in the NWSL, and we're seeing others coming through. Denise O'Sullivan, of course, she captained the North Carolina Courage to the Challenge Cup there as well. So
Sinead Farley's Cinderella story.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Like, there's so much really positive stories coming out of and I'm scratching the surface. Every single girl in that squad has a story to match. Chloe Mustaki has a phenomenal personal story as well, going back over a decade. There's so many positives. Even Megan Campbell coming back and featuring for Everton the other night off her first start, I think, of the season. That kind of stuff is huge in terms of these players coming back in and I suppose just bringing the sport to the next level, creating those players who are the inspiration for the 7 and 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds that surrounded me last weekend. It was like the Pied Piper of PRL Park. As much as I was trying to get away from them, they just seemed to flock after me until I got into the little media section where you had very conveniently weaseled yourself in at the very start.
I'm always in there. I'm always in there. My backpack and always left in there.
It shows me how little games I get to in PRL Park, but I needed a personal invite from the manager before I'd show up. No, I'm only joking. But listen, neck on the block, cup final at the weekend, wrapping up a really significant season for the sport in this country. Who's going to win? One word.
Katie Keane to have nightmare to hunt our whole team.
That's a big statement. Listen, I'm sure it's probably not unrealistic as well. It's been a great show this week. We're way over time. We're nearly up on the hour and a half mark. But listen, it's been phenomenal. Aaron, we've 1 show left, possibly 2 if we stick around for the international games at the end of the month. But the cup final comes on Sunday. Do make an effort if you're anywhere near Tala or even can get to Tala for Sunday. do buy a ticket. Make sure we set records for the women's game again this year. It's been a phenomenal year. We really want to top it off with another really, really good showpiece event with the cup final. Let's repeat it last year. Hopefully it's a close game, and hopefully both sides will serve up something special to watch at the weekend. Aaron, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me, and we'll be back next week to look back at the cup final. But hopefully we'll see all of you on in Tallaght Stadium on Sunday afternoon. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. Chat to you then.